Hello, everyone. Good evening. So we'll probably start in 2 minutes to give other a chance to connect with their either on YouTube or in Facebook or in Zoom. So I know it's everyone probably still finishing their dinner. So probably we could have this time to get to know Hannah. So actually, for those who don't know, Hanna is in Sweden right now. So I actually met Hanna last year in Prague in Eurostar testing conference, and Hannah the name Hannah get familiar with me with the leaderboard. So I was just so I was participating with the leaderboard without knowing that everyone that I'm actually the volunteer. So I'm not I'm not gonna win the prize for that. So I was just encouraging conversation, and I was actually it was actually very helpful in a way because I was actually trying to looking or analyzing how is Manila probably or Asia in terms of testing. So that's basically my intention is to see how we are performing. It's more like benchmarking in terms of what are they advanced or not, or are we able to participate with their discussion. So and yeah, that's basically the competition. so and Hannah won actually, and she was also part of the. I think there were some special segment where in Hannah talk as well.
Yeah, the
So
diversity strikes.
yeah, I guess the first is right. So probably Hannah, we're in Sweden, so probably this is our first time someone from Sweden actually. So probably for those who don't know much about Sweden, though I know it's a beautiful place and it's cold. So it's quite very opposite from Manila, which is we only have two seasons actually. It's a rainy and summer, or yeah. So probably could use this time to talk about Sweden.
Yeah, I mean, of course, Sweden's quite different from Manila. We do have 4 seasons, and we do get quite a bit of rain. Not that much snow in the south of Sweden, but in the northern parts, there's quite a lot.
Are you in the capital of Sweden? Saying okay,
No, I'm in the southwest part of Sweden in a
okay,
town called Halmstad. So it's right
okay,
between Gothenburg and Malmö, which are the two,
okay,
well, the second and the third largest cities of Sweden.
okay. Hopefully, Eurostar would be in Sweden soon, so that I could also visit Sweden.
Fingers
Okay.
crossed.
Yeah. Supposedly, the Eurostar is in Belgium. I think that was the big announcement last time, but it was online. So for those people who wanted I think you have a chance to see Hannah as well as a speaker, and
Yes.
also to get a chance to see Eurostar at software testing as well. It's one of the biggest software testing in Europe as well. So I think it's 8:03, just to make sure that we have enough time for the presentation. So probably I'll start. So welcome to our session. So from Waterfall to DevOps tester. I'll just introduce first what is MoT for those who are very new to this community. Okay, so I'm your host. I'm Tony Shumal. So I'm doing other things right now, so that's why I'm almost late for this session. So I'm doing law school. It's quite different, but it's more analysis, I guess. It will improve my critical thinking. And currently heading the head of software quality for academics in Cambridge University Press. Okay, and this is probably not updated. No, I've been keep on saying that it's 77 cities worldwide. It's probably more. So MOT is the biggest and the most supported software testing community. It's actually founded in UK as well. So these are what we believe as well. And for others who don't know, it started in Cambridge, UK as well. So Cambridge is one of considered as one of Silicon pen. That's what they call it, or Silicon Valley. So these are some of the cities. Okay, and we are a very young organization here in Manila. So we only started last year at Asian Institute of Management in collaboration with School of Innovation. Okay. And we are also in social media as well. And this is just to give again I'm very thankful for those who have participated in our software testing bootcamp last July. So it's a 3 Saturdays for 3 hours, and I'm very thankful for these mentors who have volunteered. Okay, and this is a first announcement for us as well. We'll be also having test automation bootcamp. So this will be held on November. That's November 14, 21, and 28. So again, this will be 3 Saturdays, 3 hours with with different mentors as well. So this is for free. This is online, and this will be our topics are Selenium, API, and some exercises or activities on the last. So we're still looking for other mentors. We have some mentors already, but the more the merrier, I guess. So for those people who are have a good knowledge in terms of test automation, so please message me so that we could help this industry as well. So I think I can give the floor to Hannah. Okay, to start our session. So Hannah, take the stage, please.
Yes. Let me just get the right screen here.
So I'll be recording the session, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
No worries. Can you see the screen properly? I think it's still loading for me, but there we go. Well, my talk is called From Waterfall to DevOps, a tester's journey, and I'll be talking, well, I'll introduce myself a bit. My name is Hanna Dernbrant. I work at a company called J-Way in Halmstad. I've been working with testing now for a total of 9 years. I started out in the com industry. I've also done quite a lot of support work. Ended up in medtech and now in the retail services. So it's been a journey in different fields and different types of projects. So my talk is actually divided. I will start about talking about my journey, what it was like for me going from a waterfall project to working with DevOps. I will then move on to talking about how we actually work with testing and quality in my team, in a DevOps team. And last, I will finish off with some tips and tricks on working with test and quality in DevOps. So this is the first section. And at my old job, I worked in medtech. It was extremely waterfall. We had a release maybe every 6 months to a year. And even if the code change was perhaps just the code change was done in a few hours, but the regression testing was normally a couple of weeks, 4, 5, 6 weeks. And then you have the documentation and all the other regulations after that. So it did take quite a bit of time to get things out. The amount of documentation was ridiculous. We really benefited the forest industry in Sweden. It was heaps of papers all the time and lots of different standards to adhere to. And it was also mainly manual testing, and everything had to be printed out on paper because of the regulations. So it has to be stored in a safe way, not just digitally, unfortunately. At my new job, well, I say new job, I've been there for 2.5 years, so it's not that new. But here I work in 3-week sprints. We deliver at least every sprint, normally per sprint. On top of my testing responsibility, I also have a lot of operational responsibility. So I work a lot with our support cases, our releases, and things like this. And our project is set up in microservices. And what I do is I tend to coach our members a bit on how to think about test and quality, and I'll get back to coaching further on in the presentation. Yeah, when I went from Waterfall to DevOps, it was quite a difference. At first, I got a bit, what is this? It's such an extreme difference from what I'm used to. And I wasn't really sure on how to do it. It was almost a bit scary because in Waterfall, you have your whole team of testers. Normally, you have a whole testing phase when you're supposed to do things and you're in your safe zone where you're used to being. And then going into testing all the time and releasing. Well, you could do a release in a couple of days if something's critical, and not a couple of months if something's critical. But after getting over the scared part, I felt a bit more energized about it. It was fun, the different experience. It was also such a difference in the documentation wise. When I started, I asked like, oh, well, where's the documentation so I can learn about the project? And they're like, we don't have any. I mean, of course, that's a bit too extreme. We were in the starting phase of the project, but you get the classical developer response. You can just read the code, which of course you can if you're that good at code, but it's a challenge as a tester because you have such a different way of getting into a project. As a developer, you go from like the bottom up, but as a tester, you tend to go from the top down. You have to understand the whole before you understand parts of it. Was there a question or I had someone talking? Okay, never mind. I'll move on. In DevOps, I tend to do a lot of exploratory testing, especially on our UIs that we have. And I find exploratory testing to be like a good guiding stone to actually get to know things. Of course, in the beginning, when there wasn't any documentation, testing and seeing, does this feel right? Or what happens if you do this? And just testing various scenarios that you could think of. I found that very useful to actually getting to know what are we developing and how do the different parts connect to each other. Because in microservices, it's also tricky to test sometimes because the services are interconnected and you do need to have them deployed to actually test properly. But it was quite a change in mindset. Just like, how do you work with quality in a setting like this? And how can I perform my job in this type of environment where I'm not that comfortable? I'm just with developers, everyone's experienced in the project, and you have to take your place and just change the mindset from being, well, in the team, which is pretty much the next slide as well. It's a challenge being the only tester, especially if you're used to being, in my case, I used to be a test manager and I used to have 6 or 7 people working in my team. And then you always have someone that you can bounce ideas off and just get that connection with. But when you're all alone in your role, it does get a bit tricky. How do you work with just developers? But their mindset is a bit different, so it can be a bit tricky. Like, who do you actually bounce ideas off? And for me, it was quite a lot using different communities. Like the MoT community has been really useful, and just getting to know people in the industry that you can just discuss with and learn things. And also being the only tester, it does become, of course, we're 15 people in the team, and one tester for 15 people. I can't test everything, so my role does go into coaching a lot. And coaching is pretty much just seeing that everyone's thinking about quality and just guiding them on how they should think regarding it, and asking questions. Have you thought about this or this? And just guiding them and being there as a support system if they do have questions, which they quite often do, which is really nice. I think also in the DevOps project, the developers do have an extra, well, it's extra important for them to get the quality good, because of course you do not want to get woken up by the support phone in the middle of the night. It's not a pleasant experience. Been there, done that, and it's not to recommend. So you do want to get the quality as good as possible. That's my first part of the transition, and I'll now go on to talking about how we work with DevOps in my team. We do work a lot with unit tests. Our code is based in Java, so we use a lot of rest assured tests. And because we have microservices that talk to each other, we do have a lot of mocking data, just so you can test what the other system should answer, just to see that they can connect to each other. Of course, that's not the same thing as actually having the other service, but it's a good start before you actually deploy. It does make you feel a bit more safe. Also, if the unit tests fail, it won't be possible to build. So you'll never be able to get a deployment up in an environment without it passing the build stage and all tests passing. We also have a separate service that we call the monitor service. It's also actually built on rest assured tests. And what it does is actually running tests every 15 minutes, but you can configure it to do it more frequently or less frequently. And you can also trigger separate test groups through an API if you want to test something straight away and not wait for, well, the top 14 minutes perhaps until the next run. And the monitor service partly runs tests through the API gateway that's set up, and it also runs the test cases straight onto the origin service. So this is a way that we can test our infrastructure a bit more. We do get to test the API gateway, which of course we can't do in another way than, well, we can't test it in unit tests. And yeah, so we run them all the time just to see that everything's working. We run positive cases, which are of course the most important to see that things are working. We do also test our error cases sometimes just to see that we are still getting the right errors, that there's not something that has changed in the setup, which has happened sometimes. And the monitor service will report its results onto Slack. So you can instantly see if a service is not responding. As you can see here in the slide, there's one health check that has failed. So yeah, this is a good way. And of course, with the microservices, this also tests the interconnection between the services. So if service A and service B has a dependency between each other, it will actually test that that's working. The monitor service also has the health check tests. We've built in manual health checks on our APIs, while on all the different services have a separate health check endpoint that you can call, which the monitor service has set up for each of the services. We then have it set up from Pingdom that runs through our API gateway onto the monitor service that runs the health check for all of our different services. And these health checks will also check, well, partly if the service itself considers that it's healthy, that it's got the connection with the database and things like this. So if a service is not working as intended, it will return false. And after a few minutes, Pingdom will send out an email, or if it's a critical service, it will send out an SMS. So you can also get woken up in the middle of the night because our monitoring has detected that we do have an issue. We also have Grafana and Prometheus, and that we have set up for monitoring. So here you can see the different response times for the different services. And you can filter out by just clicking on a service and see how that service is responding. You can also select a specific time frame by zooming in just with the mouse. And then you'll get for that specific time that you have zoomed in, so you can get a better view. The standard view for us is 5 days. You can also see the different errors that we're experiencing, and you can manually set how long of a time frame you want as well. And here you can also see in the top screen, we have some fields that say up, and those are the monitors. The monitor service that's reporting that all of the services are actually up and running. And we also can see status of different queues that we are working on reducing. So normally you can see different patterns if something's not acting as it should. We normally have this up on the TV in our room where we're sat, but of course now being remote, it's probably not viewed as much, but normally you'll detect things straight away if it's not as you'd expect. And it's caught quite a lot of errors, so it's a very nice tool to use. Of course, for those of you who don't know, Prometheus actually scrapes off the data and stores it, and Grafana is a way to display the data in the graph. It's a very useful tool. We also do load tests. We used to use Gatling to start with, but it didn't do it wasn't as configurable as we wanted. So one of our developers actually developed our own service that we do the load from. We normally run them from a separate AWS instance, just to simulate what real load would be like, and not to get limited by your own broadband limiting it. We also do some API testing, and we do tend to use Postman quite a lot. We have different testing scripts that we've got set up that we run for releases, and they're shared within the project. And we run them after deploys in all of the different environments. You can also run them on the staging environment. So we normally do blue-green deployments in our project. So you can actually test the services using Postman before it's live properly for customers. So this is a good way to see that the services are responding as they should. We also do a bit of UI testing as for now, we do them manually for regression, which is not ideal. We have them set up in templates in Confluence, which is not the best way. We're working on automating it in Cypress, but we have not gotten that far, unfortunately. But we do a lot of exploratory testing, and that has actually caught quite a lot of the errors that we have had. It's thankfully, it's rare that we do get errors reported from someone else. Normally, we catch them in just testing around with exploratory testing. We also work a lot with the documentation. This is a big part of my job as well. And I would stress that it's essential for DevOps projects with external customers to have good documentation. It will reduce the workload on the operation parts a lot. And it's also, of course, it's still agile, so don't document everything, but think about what you document and how you document it. It has to be easy to understand and to follow. We also have something that we call University in our project. And we use it to share knowledge within the project because we are so many and we do have the operational duties on it. This is a chance where we can get into detail on technical solutions that some of the developers have done. If we've done something particularly like some new technology, or if it's a particularly tricky code that's been done, we can bring it up and discuss it so that everyone gets an insight, because of course this is essential to know if something actually happens. It's a good way. We have it once per sprint, or actually thinking of doing it twice per sprint now, because the team's grown, so it's a lot of people. And that moves us on to my last part, which is a bit of tips and tricks that I've put together. And I would say that monitoring is key. It might be a bit extra important for microservices, but it's a good way to spot if you have changes in the system, if you have if the performance getting affected, or if anything else has gone wrong. So partly, of course, we do have the monitoring service, but also to keep an eye on the Grafana boards and to see how are the services performing. Can we see some bad patterns, like a bad trend that something's going down over time? And I can't stress this enough. I think it's the most important thing, almost just monitoring and looking what the system is, how it's feeling. Especially if you have different dependencies between the services, it can sometimes be tricky to just load test them and just to see a bit. Also, lots of unit tests is good. Try to get your developers into writing unit tests that perform well. It should still be good unit tests, but just keep them motivated to have the quality and to do right these tests, because they can catch so much, and of course they will always be run, so it's a good way to catch errors early. Also, talk about quality in the team and keep the conversation going. It's important to just talk about different quality aspects. You have documentation. Remind the developers to document. It's not always their favorite task, but they should still do it. And just talk about how could you generally improve on the work around quality in your team. Also, to be the voice of quality and to speak up. It can sometimes be a bit tricky. Of course, again, being on your own, it can be tricky to just stand up towards a team, like, because the developers could be a bit of a gang, not a gang, but like a group, and they can be really senior, and it can be a bit scary to stand up towards them. And I would still stress you to try to do it. It's important to challenge them a bit, and yeah, not to be afraid of what they might say or think of your opinions. Also, asking questions. I think it's, of course, as a tester, you are curious. It's a really good way to get to know the system. But on top of just getting to know the system, it will also make the developers think about their solution a bit more, because instead of just accepting what they say, ask, like, have you thought about perhaps implementing it differently, or why did we choose to do this? Because just getting the discussion up on if we are performing the best solution or if we could improve on it, it's really good to get the question out there and to see what could be done better. And last but not least, do keep the documentation good for, well, especially for external customers, but also for within the team, because it is really good to, if you can just point your customers the right way and just say, here is the information on how our system is working, it will help them if they are experiencing errors or problems. It might not even be a problem. It could just be they have not really understand how the system is supposed to work. So this is a really important point, I think. And that actually finishes us up what I have to say. I'd love to take any questions.
I think, Hannah, there are some question before I talk about my question. So I'll probably let's see the question from audience. So this is from Richmond Camero. So number one, DevOps has many connotation, like DevOps is a process, DevOps is a mindset, like Agile, or DevOps is a person, DevOps engineer. So we learn your view from your experience, but for you, what is your view on how do you start to try to understand what is DevOps is?
I would say it's a lot of a mindset in the team. And I know a lot of people say it's a process, but I think the most important thing is having the right mindset in the team, and just having the shared view on how you want to perform it.
Okay, and for the second question, you have mentioned that you're the only tester in the team and is involved with coaching the team on quality. I'm curious how the QA task processes are disseminated to the members of the team, like validation of ACs, automation, deployment process, to name a few.
Yeah, I mean, the developers do their automation tests. They also tend to do the load test most of the time if they've done changes that have affected, especially if you've changed like a database or something like this. As I mentioned, we haven't gotten that far on the automation. The main thing is that the unit tests are running. We are working on the Cypress, which is a joint venture between me and our UI developers. And we're waiting on an extra resource in this field as well to actually help us. So we need another front-end developer to put the effort in that is actually needed there.
Okay, so probably I could start asking my question. So this is basically quite you know, overwhelming in a way that there are a lot of technologies, in terms of transitioning from, especially if you're from manual or you're not too technical. But how you able to, to start something? I mean, in the DevOps world, there's so many things to start with, I guess. And probably there are people from the audience who also wanted to start. So if probably you can share your story, how I mean, what could be the best way to start this kind of transition, or to embed the DevOps mindset in terms with the team?
Yeah, I think for me, it's been a good thing that, well, the project started as a DevOps team. I think making the journey within the same team is probably a lot harder because now you develop from scratch. It's easy to start to think about the quality from the beginning, like how you're going to work with it. So I think transitioning might be really tricky, but I would say it's important to let the operational work in the team take a lot of time. It is a lot of time, but it also does add value because when you're involved in actually getting all the support cases, which is a great source of actually knowing what to test for the next time, because the customers, they tend to do things that you wouldn't even think of doing. And it can be a good resource for it, but it's it's a good way to get to know it, but just to think that the operational part has to take time. I think that's the most critical thing in the team because the developers want to develop, they do not want to sit with support cases.
Okay, so and how you manage this? Like for example, so you've been with the developers team, and probably they are equipped with the technicalities already. And while for the QA side, there is like a burden, to reskill or update the skill. So how do you manage that transition in terms of probably leveling up in terms of your practices? Because if developers talks about it, then you're not able to understand it. So how do you yourself transform yourself into that, so that you could able to work with them collaboratively?
Yeah, that's a good point. It can be tricky to keep up. I do try to keep up with the technical talks a bit, just to get the rough part of it. But down to the very technical details, it doesn't really happen. But yeah, just to get to know. I mean, I was fortunate enough to know a bit of Java when I started, which helps. So yeah, you can read the code and sort of see what they're doing, but it's a bit tricky to start with.
And you mentioned that you're also expanding in a way. And what could be your plans to keep this culture? Because probably there could be other people who will be joining the team. Probably there will be a culture shock in a way. So what are those plans in terms of how they're going to keep up on this kind of culture? Probably there are also some teams right now who are also very successful to put up a small team, but it's a different story once you expanded the team into more, more people. So which is something also adds complexity in terms of the dynamic. So the problem is moving forward. So are you going to keep this kind of culture? What could be their
Uh,
plans as well?
That's a really good question. And we have actually just this sprint, we've done a really big change on the setup in the team. So before, well, we're still one team, but we were also split into 3 small groups. Well, not super small, it's like 4 people in each. The different focus. So we have one group with a few microservices, and we have one group with another set of microservices. And we have one group working with UIs. And this is because it is so big and it's hard to switch between all of the different tasks. So we've sort of set the different expert areas. My role is the kind of role that spans over all 3 of the teams. So we're pretty much doing a bit of scrum of scrums, although not officially, or well, because they're not really living on their own, because the UI team is dependent on the other teams. But that's how we're working now. We've done it for 1 sprint, and it's a bit interesting because now you're almost a bit more like not in part of the team because everyone else is in small teams and you're a bit all over the place. But you could also see it that you're in 3 teams. So it's important to keep the communication going, and it can be a bit tricky with the splitting the teams up and having so many people. It's tricky to keep track of everything.
Okay. While still others are thinking for the question, so I need to keep this going. So my other question would be, so there's a good story in terms of the success of the projects, but probably I'm more curious in terms of what are the other challenges that you have. I mean, those are the usual. I mean, not every project will go smoothly, especially if you are in transition. So what could be probably what are the problems that you have encountered during this or currently or before that you think will other people's or from the audience as well will encounter it as well?
Yeah, it's to get the processes in a good way to work with DevOps. I think we've put in a lot of time into how we work with our support cases, and when we onboard new customers, we have a whole routine set for actions that needs to perform, and actually parts of education as well. So educating your customers when they get on board on your solution is a good way to perhaps avoid too many questions. It's also a really good way to catch potential requirements that they would have on the solution. So you could get more feature requests this way as well.
Okay, so we have a question actually from the chat. So if you can read read this so that you will understand more, I guess, if you would
Yeah, let me just see
yeah
where I get
yeah
the questions.
yeah. Let me
Well,
know if I could also read it
yeah,
as
I
well.
have it here.
Okay.
Let's see, is it this last one?
Yes, yeah. Actually, it's a question from our YouTube audience.
Oh. Yeah, this is a tricky part, and it's actually one that I have struggled a little bit with. Well,
I'll
I
just
think you,
yeah.
yeah,
I'll just read the question for those people who wasn't able to. So, is there any tips for QA to collaborate or speak up with the team in the challenging COVID period? So, I think the situation right now is a lot of people are working remotely, and this could be a challenges in terms of collaboration at
yeah.
this point.
I find it personally that the biggest obstacle that I'm having is I'm used to overhearing what my colleagues are talking about, and this is a way that I tend to catch things early. And I don't, of course, now because they just call each other, and I'm not. Well, I don't trace their calls. Maybe I should start to, but this is something I really struggle with. So I'm trying to get them to talk to me a bit more, and we do have a daily within all the different teams as well, where you can join in if you want, and this could be a good way to discuss. I also tend to alternate a bit on what daily I'm in, and to try to listen in, but it's for sure a challenge, and especially with working with support cases, it can be tricky to get the attention of the team, because, well, they're sat at home and they're in their own little bubble sometimes. So yeah, it's a good question, and it's a bit tricky.
Yeah. So just to give more context, Hannah, is Sweden right now, or most of the people are working remotely, or I mean, in
Well,
Manila, where mostly everyone, I would say, is a lot of us are working remotely because of the higher cases. But I'm not sure for Sweden how are the current environment for now.
well, we've never been in official lockdown in Sweden, so that way we're a bit different. However, we are always keeping our distance between each other. I've heard that Swedes are the people that tend to want the most distance between each other when you talk. So we were doing this a bit before as well. But it's recommended to work from home if you can, but there's not too many restrictions going on.
That's very fortunate
Yeah,
to be to be
I
in
shouldn't
Sweden
go.
to be in Sweden at this moment.
I can't really complain, because I know a lot of people are worse off at the moment.
Yes, we've been stuck here for almost months already. But anyway, actually, Jason is in Australia. So actually, the question is from Sydney actually. So, which probably much the same experience that you have. And for other questions, so from Milan, so how do you manage the tasks within the team? Are you using Jira or other management tools?
Yes, we are using Jira, and since we split into the smaller teams, we do still have our main Jira, but we've used assigned team function. So partly you can see everyone's tasks on the main board, but the teams also have separate ones where they can only view their own tasks.
Okay, so other question would be probably if someone will apply in your team. Okay, so what are the potential? What are the skills that you're looking? I mean, something that you think that will he or she will be successful to be part of your team.
Well, you have to be, you can't be afraid to put, well, to just put your nose where it doesn't belong, I almost said, but just to get into the discussion and to question things. I think that's the most important thing, just to take the discussion and get to know things by, well, discussing and questioning.
Okay.
It's really
In
important.
terms, yeah, in terms of skills, so mean say you have to be confident in a way that to ask
Yeah,
question, or I mean that's a typical scenario for a QA because since
yeah,
it's quite technical, so probably a lot of us are trying not to involve with those some kind of discussion because we're probably not sure in terms of how we could contribute, or probably we feel somehow not confident to to be part of discussion. So good to know that you're looking for those kind of attitude in terms of something that would really probably willing to be part of that discussion and question the assumptions perhaps. So
yeah, exactly. It's more about how things are working, not necessarily. I wouldn't like go in and ask like, "What did you think about this code?" Because I won't really understand it. But as a whole, with like the different processes and how we're thinking about the logic, I think that you can always talk a bit around. And
okay.
don't be afraid to say anything that might be interpreted as like stupid. I mean, there are no stupid questions, so it's a good way to actually perhaps get more technical and get the better understanding.
Yeah, I think that's I'll talk about in terms of my experience in a way that we sometimes we don't want to involve because we felt that they are the one who are expert there, so we probably raise the white flag right away that okay, I won't be involved on that because that is not my expertise. So and it's a good probably a good takeaway for tonight is that even though it's not your expertise. So probably there also a room for question or questioning the assumption. Why is it like that? I think that that would establish collaboration, that you are also wanted to understand how important they are doing. So I think somehow the communication would improve in a way that you're also trying to show you're interested in terms of how probably how difficult they're also working on. And okay, so what about for for a technical skill? So that could be probably an attitude or a soft skills, if may I call that. What about for a technical skill? So what are you looking to be part of your team?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I'd like someone at the moment who's good at like, well, UI automation, as it's something I haven't really worked with. It's a new skill set for me. So that's good. In my team as well, it's also good to try to know the code a little bit. I mean, I tend to say that I can read code. I can't really write it very well, but I can read it and sort of understand it. So I think a good reading level of code, but you don't have to be like the coding expert.
Okay. So my question is actually more of looking in terms of what could be like, for example, there are people who wanted to this transition. So probably this could be a high level idea in terms of what I do need right now to be part of this growing trends or growing this I mean this kind of culture to be with. So we have other question actually. So what do you envision the UI regression automation success through DevOps?
That's a good question. I'm of course in the regression tests you're hoping not to find anything because you're hoping the developers have thought about it. But I'm hoping it would accidentally broke it by the API in the background. And I'm hoping that would be successful, but we haven't gotten that far, so I don't have that good insights on how well it would actually work.
Okay. So actually, from analyzing your talk, the way I see the strategy is that you've really built a good unit test for developers, because if unit tests were able to catch a lot of defects, then what more to encounter during regression? So I think that's a good strategy for
Yeah.
everyone, because you already somehow lessen the problem on the QA side, and probably that is not a very common from 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 the industry. How do you encourage those developers to really put more time in terms of unit testing?
Well, just threaten them with a phone call in the middle of the night is quite a good strategy. I mean, you do get a bit more, instead of just handing it off to a different team once the product is developed, you do get an extra responsibility. So that's a good motivation, because you don't really want like some confused phone call in the middle of the night saying the service has gone down and you're like, oh, that's not good. So that's a good motivator. And it's also, I think it's a good thing, well, within being a tester in a DevOps team, if you're supposed to be part of the actual DevOps work with having the phone, I think the technical understanding is essential.
Okay, so from what you said, are you also monitoring the unit test? Because I mean, in other organization, they don't see the unit tests, and most of the QA are their visibility is in their in just in their testing, so they don't somehow involve in terms of what is really happened to your unit tests. As long as it's work, so they don't get involved. So probably could have some details about how you are trying to. Are you monitoring the unit tests, or are they
Not
reporting it?
really. I mean, of course, they can't build anything. So if the unit tests are not working, they won't be able to get it out in any environment. I do tend to view their pull requests sometimes and try to understand, well, to read the tests, but I do leave it a bit more to them and their responsibility. But they are really good at actually performing and writing unit tests,
Okay.
just so we don't get anything bad out. Well, not anything. Of course, you get some bad things, but it filters it.
Okay, there's Okay, I'm checking if there are some questions. If not, I need to continue. So, what about tools for unit tests? Are there any monitoring tools? I remember we are using Sonar Cube. Okay, so this is a good way to check whether are there any things that developers are working, or probably that could be their technical depth as well. So, are there
Yeah,
any tools that you are the developers are using for their unit tests?
they are using SonarCube as well, as you mentioned. It's a good way to see a bit what you're testing. Of course, with unit testing, it's not that you have to cover 100%. That's not really possible and not necessarily beneficial. But it's a good way to see what you are covering and if you've missed any essential parts.
So, how do you are you regularly checking the Sonar Cube, or is it part of your day-to-day activities, or
No,
like
that's more
okay,
the developer's job.
okay,
So they tend to check it, and especially also SonarCube will let you know if you've written too complex code. We've gotten that a
yes,
few times, so it's really helpful for guiding the developers in the right way.
okay. Okay, yeah, that's also pretty much our practice. Though the Sonar Cube was there, but we didn't. We spend more time in terms of testing, and we let the developers solve the problems. That could be too technical, or that could be their code base for probably that they could discuss.
Yeah,
Okay,
especially if it says that this code is too complex. Yeah, I'm not going to touch it. That's someone else's problem.
okay, okay. So, do you guys have any question? We still have like 9 minutes. So, okay, if there are no questions, probably this could be my last question.
Yeah.
Though I think it already mentioned how you started, or what are the trigger points for why do you started this DevOps mindset in the team? Why not start with agile, or are you in agile and then it's a combination of that mindset? So those probably some of the question, or probably some other are confused because they are transition from waterfall to agile, then we're talking about a waterfall transition to DevOps, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Of course, I mean, the team was performing DevOps from the scratch when we started the project. And the main reason for this was that we wanted to be able to do the changes that we wanted and not be dependent on the different organization or team for the operational work. And like granting some other team access to your code and performing changes if something's not acting right in production. It's not really something we wanted to hand over to another team. And this is the main reason why we chose to do DevOps. We want to own the code and work for having it in a good way. And the DevOps mindset is a good way to just keep the, well, the importance of quality and just what you develop. And it's a different sense of ownership for the code that you've written.
Okay, as promised, that will be my last question. Though I have so many questions, but anyway, so just to keep everyone, you know, okay, so this will be the last call for the audience. If you have any question, um, before we end, and of course, we'd like to thank Hannah for this opportunity. So this is actually, on the other side of the world. Okay,
Yeah,
speaking
I,
to the Manila.
I would really appreciate. I'll send out a link to a feedback form. I'd love some feedback as I'm performing this for a conference in a month. So any feedback would be very welcome.
Okay. Okay, yeah. So it's actually in our chat. So Hannah sent the feedback form. I think there are no other question, and would say this again. Thank you, Hannah, for this opportunity, and I hope to see you more.
Yeah.
We wanted to know what had happened, okay, or what could be the improvements from this year to the following to the next year in terms of what happened to the team. For sure, it will become a big team, so there could be different challenges from that as well. So if there are no more questions, so probably we can end this session. And thank you everyone for this, to Hannah, to Johnny, a freelancer for YouTube. Okay, so Johnny is our partner, freelancer is our partner for our YouTube streaming as well. And thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Please don't forget the feedback form. And thank you everyone again.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
okay, bye.